I was always the one people could count on, especially my little brother. While our parents barely kept themselves together, I held the rest of it up. I helped with homework when I still had my own to finish. I learned how to cook dinner before I even knew how to drive. And when he cried at night, I was the one who held his hand and told him it was going to be okay, even when I wasn't so sure myself. He was my responsibility before I ever had a choice in the matter. And I never once complained. I helped pay for his college when the financial aid didn't stretch far enough. Quietly. No big gesture, no strings. When he called me in the middle of the night after a breakup or a panic attack, I picked up, always. I was the one who drove 3 hours with soup and jumper cables when his car battery died in the snow. I've shown up for him more times than I can count. And not because I had to, because I wanted to, because that's what family means to me. So when I saw that photo, it felt like someone had kicked the air out of my lungs. His fiancée, beaming, holding a champagne glass that said "Bride Vibes," tagged at some luxury resort in the Caribbean. The caption? "Can't wait to say, I do in paradise." At first I thought, no, hoped, maybe it was a small elopement, just the two of them. But then a cousin mentioned they'd already RSVP'd, and someone else posted the save the date stuck on their fridge. I wasn't just missing an invite. I was missing from the picture entirely. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, told myself it had to be a mistake. But when I finally got the courage to ask someone about it, just casually, like it didn't already hurt, they looked at me like I was the awkward relative no one wanted to deal with. And then they said it. Maybe they thought you wouldn't fit the vibe. Like I was some outdated piece of furniture they couldn't wait to leave behind. I didn't say anything in that moment. But inside, something snapped. And it didn't break quietly. You know what's funny? I wasn't even angry at first, not in the fire-breathing, plate-smashing way people expect. It was quieter than that. A low hum in my chest, like grief with sharp edges. I sat on my couch, phone still in my hand, trying to understand how I'd become a footnote in my own brother's life story. The same brother who once called me his hero in a high school essay, who said I was the reason he believed in second chances. And now, I didn't even make the guest list. I started second-guessing everything. Did I push too hard? Hover too much? Was I too plain? Too real? I scrolled through the names tagged in posts, influencers, fitness coaches, a few people I knew he'd only met once. Everyone looked like they belonged on a lifestyle magazine cover. Airbrushed smiles, curated perfection. And there I was, somewhere in his past, like an old backpack that had served its purpose but didn't match the outfit anymore. It hurt in ways I didn't expect. I thought about calling him, thought about sending a message, asking what happened, where I went wrong. But the truth is, I already knew. I didn't fit the version of him he was trying to sell now. The new life he'd built wasn't just about starting fresh. It was about erasing the parts that didn't photograph well. I wasn't glossy enough, not filtered enough. I wasn't part of the rebrand, and that realization settled in me like cold coffee, bitter, lingering. That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat in the dark, letting the silence wrap around me. I wasn't just excluded, I was discarded. And yet, even through the heartbreak, a tiny voice inside me whispered, "You're not done here." Because if he truly thought I didn't fit the vibe, then he never really understood who I am. And that's about to change. I started remembering things, little moments. Like when he forgot his lines in the school play and looked straight at me in the audience, and I mouthed the words back to him, steady as ever. Or the time he called me crying after Dad's relapse, and I stayed on the phone all night, whispering, "You're not alone, I've got you." These weren't grand, cinematic gestures. They were quiet, constant acts of love, the kind of things no one claps for, but that keep a person standing when the world tries to knock them down. And maybe that's what stung the most. I didn't just help raise him, I protected him from a life that would have swallowed him whole. I stood between him and the chaos more times than I could count. I didn't do it for thanks or a spotlight. I did it because he was mine, my kid brother, my responsibility, and now I was nothing but an afterthought, or worse, a liability to his new image. But the thing about being cast aside is, it makes you pay attention. It sharpens you. I started looking closer at who he'd become, who he was trying so hard to impress. All style, no soul, all aesthetics, no heart. And the more I saw, the clearer it became. He hadn't just forgotten me. He'd forgotten himself. That sweet, scared kid who used to sleep on my bedroom floor after nightmares, now replaced by someone polished, practiced, and painfully hollow. So I made a decision. One I didn't announce. One I didn't cry over. I wiped my face, stood up, and whispered to the room, if he thought I wouldn't fit the vibe. I smiled, slow and certain. He's about to learn what I really bring to the party. I didn't slam doors or write angry texts. That's not my style. What I did was quieter, but far more dangerous. I opened my laptop, found the wedding date, the resort, the guest list clues hidden in hashtags and posts. I booked a flight, direct, window seat. I reserved a suite at the same 5-star resort. Not a standard room, a suite, with a balcony. Then I ordered a dress, not just any dress, one that made the mirror whisper damn back at me. There was no announcement, no drama. I didn't post a thing. I let the silence work in my favor. Let them believe I was still curled up somewhere, licking my wounds. While they sipped pre-wedding cocktails, I was planning my entrance, not to disrupt, but to redefine. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at that table. I was going to walk in like I owned the damn table and had just been running late. Graceful, sharp, unbothered. That was the mood. In between bookings, I started piecing together the real story. The wedding wasn't just expensive, it was curated. Every guest was handpicked for how well they'd photograph, how well they fit the fantasy. Influencers, lifestyle coaches, crypto bros in linen shirts. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a campaign. And I was the crack in the perfect frame, too real. Too familiar, too unfiltered. I'd seen him cry, throw up from anxiety, break down over nothing. That didn't fit the new version. But I wasn't showing up to scream or cause a scene. I had something else in mind, something smarter. I wasn't just going to crash the wedding, I was going to rewrite the whole narrative, not by being loud, but by being unforgettable. Because the best revenge isn't messy, it's meticulous. And mine? Mine was already boarding at gate 17. I didn't pack light. I packed like a woman with purpose. Every outfit was intentional. Every shoe had a role. I chose colors that said, elegant, not desperate, and fabrics that moved like they had secrets. And my makeup? Soft, timeless, just enough to make them wonder if I was glowing from within or simply unbothered. I wasn't trying to outshine anyone. I just wanted to remind them I was never the dim light they tried to shade. I had simply stepped out of the room. As I zipped up my suitcase, I thought about the version of me they must have created in their heads. Probably imagined me crying into a pillow, playing the victim. But that's not who I am. Never has been. I've always been the one who acts, who shows up, who fixes things. And this time, I wasn't showing up to fix anything for him. I was showing up for me, to reclaim space I should never have had to fight for in the first place. There's a certain power that comes from being underestimated. They thought I'd stay home, thought I'd keep quiet, thought I'd disappear into the background like a forgotten favor. And I almost did. But the deeper truth is, I'd spent so much of my life making others comfortable, I'd forgotten what it felt like to take up space for my own damn self. And now that I'd remembered, there was no going back. Standing at the airport, ticket in hand, I looked around at the sea of people, most of them lost in their own lives. No one knew what I was about to do. No one saw the shift happening under my skin, But I felt it. This wasn't just a trip, it was a quiet declaration. And as the final boarding call echoed overhead, I whispered to no one in particular, "Let's ruin a wedding with grace." The plane ride felt strangely calm, like the kind of silence you get before a thunderstorm. I watched the clouds shift outside my window, fingers resting lightly on the armrest, heart steady. I wasn't nervous, I wasn't second-guessing. What I felt was something deeper, a kind of quiet knowing. This wasn't revenge fueled by rage, it was rooted in clarity. I didn't want to tear anything down. I just wanted to remind them what they tried to forget: who I really am. As we touched down, I felt the warmth of the island air press against the cabin windows. It smelled like salt and sun lotion and money. Even the baggage claim looked like it had been designed for an Instagram reel. I collected my suitcase with a soft smile and walked like I belonged there, because I did. I wasn't the outsider in this story. I was the one who helped build the main character, and they tried to crop me out of the final shot. At the resort, the check-in desk greeted me with the kind of courtesy they reserve for people who tip well and cause no fuss. I leaned into that energy. Let them see confidence, elegance, ease. Not because I was pretending, but because I was finally owning it. I didn't have to announce my presence, I just had to be present. That's the thing about authenticity. It doesn't shout, it radiates. That night, I opened my balcony doors, stepped outside, and let the ocean air tangle in my hair. Somewhere on this island, they were laughing over rehearsal dinner drinks, believing the guest list was perfectly controlled. But I was here now, on their turf, in my own rhythm. And what came next? Well, that part was going to be beautiful. I didn't arrive with fanfare. I didn't need it. I let the breeze do most of the work, catching the hem of my dress, brushing my hair back just enough to look effortless. My heels clicked softly against marble floors as I walked into the resort's main lounge. A few heads turned. That's the thing about presence. When it's real, it doesn't need volume. I ordered a drink I couldn't pronounce, leaned casually against the bar, and let myself be seen, slowly, deliberately. The first ripple was small. A woman in oversized sunglasses paused mid-sentence, squinting over her mimosa. Then a man, vaguely familiar, all teeth and tight linen, did a double take. I met his eyes, smiled with just the right amount of warmth and mystery, then turned away. I didn't need introductions. I was the unexpected plot twist, the one who wasn't on the call sheet, but who everyone suddenly needed to understand. Curiosity spread faster than gossip. And on islands like this, gossip moves like wildfire. I strolled the resort grounds like they were mine, not out of arrogance, but out of memory. I'd carried this boy-turned-groom through storms far worse than tropical heat. And now, as he played host to his curated new world, I became the echo of a truth he couldn't shake. I posted one photo, just one. A soft focus shot of my view from the infinity pool, captioned simply, "Peace looks good on me." No tags, no drama. Just a quiet reclaiming of space. It didn't take long. The whispers started. Someone asked, "Is that his sister?" Another replied, "I thought she wasn't coming." And then, somewhere behind me, I heard the unmistakable sound of panic, wrapped in a familiar voice. My brother. I didn't turn around. Not yet. I wanted him to sit in the tension a little longer. Let him wonder who I'd spoken to, who had smiled at me, who had noticed me. Let him feel the weight of the omission he tried to make invisible. He finally found me by the pool, half sitting, half pacing, his voice hushed but sharp. "What are you doing here?" he asked, like I was a stain on his perfect white linen narrative. I sipped my drink and tilted my head, keeping my voice soft. "Oh," I said, "I thought the invitation got lost in the mail." I smiled, not cruelly, just knowingly. like someone who sees the cracks in the walls and decides to admire the architecture anyway. He looked around, anxious, like the presence of his real life might unravel everything. "I just didn't think you'd want to come," he mumbled, not quite meeting my eyes. That part hurt, the cowardice of it. Not the exclusion, but the refusal to own it. He couldn't even say it straight. "You didn't fit the image." I let him flail in his discomfort. I'd spent too many years cushioning his guilt, minimizing his mistakes. Not anymore. "Well," I replied, voice light as sea foam, "it's a good thing I'm full of surprises." Then I stood and walked away, not looking back, the hem of my dress trailing behind like a ribbon of quiet defiance. The next few hours were magic, not in the romantic, whimsical way they were hoping their wedding would be. No, it was a different kind of magic. I talked, I laughed, I listened. And slowly, people started leaning in. The groom's future in-laws adored me. The mother of the bride said I had an old soul and modern charm, whatever that means. I let them talk, let them form their own version of me. Not the discarded sister, but the woman who walks into a room and holds it with nothing but calm assurance and good posture. By the time the rehearsal dinner rolled around, I wasn't just part of the backdrop. I was part of the conversation. I wasn't loud, wasn't flashy, but I was there, present, unignorable. And when I slipped the USB into the wedding planner's hand with a gentle smile and said, "I'd love for this to be played during the reception," she smiled back, completely unaware of what she was holding. It wasn't a bomb. It was a mirror, and I knew exactly when it would crack. That night, I stood on my balcony again, this time watching the lights flicker across the beach as music drifted from the open-air reception hall. Laughter floated up through the air, but it sounded thinner than before, like something forced, practiced. He had built this entire weekend like a stage play, every role perfectly cast. But the thing about live performances, one unexpected character can shift the whole tone. And I was no understudy. I was the part they tried to write out, now writing herself back in, line by line. I could feel it happening already, the sidelong glances, the hesitant questions. The slow unraveling of certainty. People were curious, and not in the malicious tabloid way. They were curious in that deep down, something feels off kind of way. That instinct people have when the mask slips, even just a little. I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't need to shout my history from a rooftop. I just needed to exist, confidently, gracefully, and let the truth speak for itself. Still, I couldn't deny the ache that crept in when I saw them all, celebrating a life I helped shape, from the shadows, only to be edited out of the highlight reel. But I'd carried that weight long enough, and the slideshow waiting quietly in the planner's folder? That was my hand finally setting it down. Not with cruelty, not with vengeance, just with clarity. A curated life couldn't compete with a lived one, especially not when the past showed up dressed in dignity. The next day, they'd play the video. Faces would change, assumptions would buckle, and somewhere in that room, my brother would feel something unfamiliar. Not shame, not regret exactly, but something far more uncomfortable. Recognition. But tonight, I would rest. I'd done my part. And tomorrow, the spotlight was going to land exactly where it always should have been. Weddings have a rhythm, a predictable swell, champagne, speeches, the big toast. Everyone plays along, clapping on cue, laughing at stories that sound rehearsed. I watched it all from my table near the back, hands folded neatly in my lap, the kind of poise that makes people underestimate what you're capable of. They had no idea what was coming, not the bride, not the groom, and certainly not the roomful of curated perfection basking under string lights and a filtered sunset. The planner tapped the mic with a smile and said, "Before we bring out dessert, we have a little surprise from the groom's side of the family." I saw his face twitch, just the smallest flicker. He knew. Somewhere deep down, he knew. But it was too late to stop it. The lights dimmed, the projector clicked on. And then, there we were. Not him and his new life, not the glossy montage they expected. No, it was us. The real us. A grainy video of his graduation. Me in the background, hoarse from cheering. A still photo of us on the day he moved into his first apartment. Me holding a set of keys, still in my work scrubs, eyes tired but proud. Another clip, older, shakier, him sobbing in a hoodie, and my voice off camera saying, "You're going to get through this, okay? You've got me." The room shifted. I heard forks pause mid-air, napkins lowered. Even the music had the sense to stay quiet. Slide after slide, birthdays, breakups, emergency room visits, late-night phone calls, all the invisible labor of love I'd poured into his life. No filters, no edits, just memories, proof. And then the final slide. White text on a black background, simple, honest. To the sister who gave everything and wasn't invited. There it was, a sentence that cut cleaner than any scream ever could. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sacred. The kind of silence that falls when a room realizes it's been looking in the wrong direction. No one clapped. No one moved. You could hear the soft whir of the projector still running, as if even it didn't know what to do next. I stayed seated. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I let the truth do the work. And judging by the bride's face, frozen, eyes darting, it was doing more than enough. She looked at him then, really looked at him. Not as a groom, not as a brand, but as a man with a past, one she clearly hadn't been fully introduced to. I saw it, the crack, that flicker of suspicion, of realization. And in that brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because I hadn't come here to destroy their love story. I came to remind him, and everyone else, that love without loyalty is just performance. He stood up slowly, looking toward me like I was a ghost from a chapter he'd skipped. I met his eyes without flinching. There was no rage there, no triumph, just recognition, and maybe, just maybe, a trace of shame. Good. Let him carry that for once. Let him sit in the space where my presence used to be and understand the cost of pushing it away. He took one step in my direction, then thought better of it. He didn't have the words. He never did when the truth didn't serve him. I stood then, slowly, collected. Not dramatic, not disruptive, just done. I raised my glass, a simple nod to the room. "To the happy couple," I said. My voice didn't shake. "Enjoy your new life." Then I turned to him and added gently, "You erased your past, but I made sure no one forgets it." And with that, I walked out, not just from the wedding, but from the shadow I'd lived in for far too long. As I walked through the lobby, heels tapping against polished tile, no one stopped me. A few people looked up, unsure if they should say something, but they didn't. That was fine. I didn't need applause. I didn't need validation. What I needed, what I got, was that perfect stillness that comes when you finally set a boundary so clean, it hums. I wasn't running away. I was walking out on my terms, and that's a kind of peace you can't fake for Instagram. Outside, the air was thick with sea salt and aftermath. I stood there for a moment, letting the night wrap around me, the music from the reception muffled by distance. Somewhere behind me, I imagined the unraveling had already begun. Questions whispered, assumptions shattered, truth lingering like perfume, impossible to ignore. They'd all seen the slideshow. They couldn't unsee it, and he'd have to live with what he chose to forget. But here's the thing. I didn't do it to embarrass him. I didn't do it to punish. I did it because the erasure was too loud, too deliberate. And women like me, the quiet builders, the emotional load bearers, the uninvited, were so often erased in silence. I refused to let that happen. I had to remind everyone, especially him, that I wasn't background noise in his rise. I was the scaffolding, the steady hand, the history. I walked down the stone steps, heels in hand now, dress whispering around my legs. The ocean stretched ahead, wide, endless, indifferent. But I felt light, not vindicated, not victorious, just free. Whatever came next, whatever cracks formed behind me, that wasn't my burden anymore. I'd told the truth with grace. And now, I was finally ready to build something of my own. The wedding didn't end with a fairy tale kiss. It ended in fragments, clipped conversations, uncomfortable glances, guests excusing themselves early under the weight of too much truth. Word traveled fast. The bride's parents weren't just shocked, they were furious. Not at me, but at the man they'd welcomed in with open arms, only to realize he came carrying someone else's history he was too ashamed to acknowledge. The perfect image cracked right down the center, and it was no longer flattering. Back home, the silence I returned to felt different. It wasn't heavy or lonely. It was earned. My phone buzzed nonstop. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, friends of friends, even a stranger who said, "You handled that like poetry with teeth." I smiled at that one. Because it was never about revenge. It was about the truth being louder than the performance. And now, the people who mattered? They saw it. They saw me. Maybe for the first time in years. The craziest part? I didn't feel bitter. I didn't want his life to collapse. I just wanted mine to start. And for the first time in a long time, I could feel the space clearing for that. I was no longer holding everything together for someone else. I was planting new ground for myself. People kept reaching out, asking if I'd do interviews, podcasts, write a book. I turned them down at first. I needed time, not to heal, but to breathe. To enjoy the quiet I wasn't trapped in. I started walking in the mornings, cooking meals just for me, buying fresh flowers, not because anyone would see them, but because I would. That, to me, was power, taking up space without asking permission. I'd spent years being the strong one, the responsible one, the selfless one. But now I was curious what it felt like to be free. And I was just getting started. The fallout came quietly, like I knew it would. A cousin mentioned the honeymoon was cut short. Rumors said the bride's family had questions, not just about me, but about who he really was beneath the tailored suits and polished vows. I didn't gloat. I didn't watch from a distance like some villain twirling a wine glass. I had better things to do. My life was finally shifting into something of my own design. And for once, I wasn't building it around someone else's needs. I took a long look at my past, not with shame, but with gratitude. All those years I spent showing up for others had shaped something fierce and steady inside me. But I'd never once asked what it might look like to show up for myself. So I did. I started mapping out a new kind of future, one where I wasn't an afterthought or the support act. I wanted something that felt beautiful and raw and mine, something real, not curated. That's when the idea came, like a whisper at first. I'd helped plan birthdays, anniversaries, even funerals. I knew how to create spaces that made people feel seen, not flashy, not staged, authentic, the kind of moments people actually remember. And so, I started sketching. Names, colors, branding. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about building something from the ashes, not of failure, but of freedom. I was ready to bloom. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was launching a business about celebration, right after crashing the most performative one I'd ever witnessed. But that's the thing. Real joy doesn't need an audience. It needs intention. and I had more of that now than I ever did before. I wasn't just moving on. I was moving forward, with purpose, with power, and with a soft, steady fire that refused to dim. Months later, I stood in the middle of my first event, a small wedding in a greenhouse overflowing with candlelight and hydrangeas. Not a single influencer in sight. Just real people, holding hands, crying at the vows, laughing over cake that wasn't gluten-free or gold-dusted, just delicious. I'd designed it all. The colors, the pacing, the feeling. And the bride? She hugged me after the ceremony, eyes misty, and whispered, "This felt like us." That's when I knew I'd found my lane. Word spread fast, not viral like my story did. This was slower, sweeter, referrals, quiet praise. People wanted more than Pinterest-perfect moments. They wanted warmth. They wanted honesty. And somehow, I'd become the one who could give them that. It didn't erase the hurt from before, but it gave the pain a purpose. It gave me a purpose, one that didn't shrink to fit into someone else's storyline. I never heard much from him after the wedding. A message came once, short, vague, too little, too late. I didn't answer, not out of spite, but out of peace. I didn't need closure from someone who never gave me credit when it counted. My closure came in small moments now, like a mother thanking me for how I arranged the flowers to honor her late father, or a couple dancing under lights I'd strung by hand. Those were the new chapters, and I was writing every single one of them myself. One morning, as I tied a ribbon around a bouquet, I looked out the window of my new studio and felt something I hadn't in years. Joy without explanation. I thought about everything I'd walked through to get here. The silence, the pain, the truth. And I smiled, because some people want a perfect image, but me, I'd rather live a beautiful truth.